Good afternoon, everyone. PCT Magazine is pleased to provide an online forum for product suppliers serving the pest management industry to update our readers on the latest news and product information from their companies. In today's webinar, sponsored by Bayer, Joe Barilli and Dr. Kurt Vandock will discuss effective, scientifically sound mosquito control for less. Following their presentation, there will be time for questions from those in attendance at today's webinar. So please type your questions into the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and they'll answer as many of your questions as time allows. Dr. Kurt Vandock, Head of Public Health for Bayer, is Head of Public Health for Bayer. His professional pest management experience began with the United States Armed Forces, where he served as an Army entomologist. He continues to be a global thought leader in vector control, consulting with myriad organizations, including recent work with the CDC. Joe Barilli is no stranger to pest management either. He has done it all, from university extension entomology to technical direction for a multi-branch pest control firm. His over 30 years of experiences and thought leadership have brought him to where he is now as the technical service lead for Bayer Environmental Services professional pest management team. Joe and Kurt are both on the Bayer Pest Practices team, a team of experts who will help keep you in the know on all things pest management. Kurt and Joe, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dan. This is Joe Barilli. First, I'd like to thank Dan and the PCT team for giving us this platform today and helping us coordinate this meeting. Also, I'd like to thank all of you out in the audience for taking time from your very, very busy schedule. It's clear from the feedback that's going on across the country, the pest season has broken very, very strongly, not only mosquitoes, but across the board. So again, appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with us today. Kurt, why don't you kick it off, if you could, please.
Yeah, Joe, thanks. And thanks again to Dan and to everyone in attendance. As Joe alluded to, this topic is of great interest, especially with the heavy pressure we're seeing so early in the season. But first, I just kind of wanted to talk about why this is a key focus point for Bayer and why today we want to take this time to talk to you about effective mosquito control that's scientifically based and doing it for less. And to do that, I think we're going to start off with a visual, and that's talking about the world's deadliest animals. I just returned from a beach vacation with my family, and my little daughter kept asking me if she had to worry about sharks. And I said, no, you don't have to worry about sharks at all. Actually, if you look at this chart of the world's deadliest animals, you can see sharks are way at the bottom of the list. In fact, freshwater snails are certainly more deadly because of the schistosomiasis that they can transmit. And of course, as you'd expect, humans are very far up on the list of the world's deadliest animals. But the real point I want to make with this slide is while these scary things like sharks and wolves and snakes certainly can create some emotion and some concern in people, the deadliest animal in the world, and this might shock some people, is not us. It's not that shark. It's actually what we're talking about today. It's the mosquito, responsible for nearly 750,000 deaths annually, and that, for everyone on the line, is a conservative. That is a conservative estimate. So this is where we're at. This is why it's critically important that when you are doing mosquito control, that you're doing it in the best way possible and basing your approach and your control measures on sound science. And at Bayer, that's what we're going to deliver to you today.
Right on, Kurt, and let me kind of steal some thunder from a good friend of mine. Why the big deal about mosquitoes now? I mean, we've been involved in mosquito management in this country now for over a century, organized mosquito control. The pest control industry has always had the option of providing some sort of remedial service for mosquitoes. But in the words of Dr. Mike Potter at the University of Kentucky, as he taught us, I think it was about 2006 or 2007, as the bedbug resurgence occurred, in the mosquito world, we are experiencing the perfect storm with them. And part of that is the fact that through the media, the public has become aware of the danger, the risk of being associated or being bitten by mosquitoes, and it's primarily through the resurgence of Zika into the New World, up from South America through the Caribbean, and now established in the United States. If you look at some of these figures here on this chart, some of these issues here are probably a lot more day-to-day in everything that we do in pest management. The asthma risk to reaction to cockroach infestations, rodent activity, which brings along the hantavirus risk. But boy, I'll tell you, Zika certainly has taken the headlines. So people are confronting all of us with questions, and some of these questions are very difficult to ask because mosquito management's a lot different than German cockroach management or house mouse management. So this is what we want to kind of share with you today. And Kurt, let's go on to the next slide if we can, please.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. When we look at a map like this, you can see why people across the country would certainly be concerned. This is a map that has some data that was put out by the CDC very recently. You can see it was from 2017, and you can see these are laboratory-confirmed Zika virus cases. Now, we know that local transmission was identified in Florida and in that Miami region. That's what was all over the news last year, and Joe just touched on that. But what's important to remember is that this map shows all of the cases across the United States. And remember, if somebody does have Zika virus, even if they contracted it in the Caribbean, they are a competent reservoir for this virus. And if a mosquito such as Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus, and now there's other confirmed vectors, were to bite this person, the possibility exists for transmission of disease. And when you look at this map, you can see that this is justified, that we should be concerned about it. We shouldn't certainly not be fearful, but be concerned, take it seriously, especially when we think about how, as pest control professionals, we approach the mosquito service itself. And it's not just Zika. We know West Nile virus has been around for quite some time. And Joe, I'll let you speak to this.
Yeah, you're right, Kurt. The audience may not realize, but when I first got out of school, my first job was at a public mosquito control project. And up here where I'm speaking to you from today, where I live up in New England, Zika, the threat of Zika is not significant as of yet, but we certainly spend a lot of time thinking and planning. And in fact, I had my monthly project meeting today. We reviewed the local emergency action plan that we have, not only for Zika, but the two big diseases that we pay close attention to is West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis. We don't hear about some of these other diseases, these other threats, all too often, but I can tell you in my experience, I've had to speak to members of the public who have lost family members from mosquito bites, and I struggle with that. I find it very difficult to have to explain to anyone, whether they've incurred a loss or they've become ill or they're just concerned about this, how in this day and age we have to worry about such a small insect causing such big problems out there. So mosquito control is important from a public health standpoint. It's also important from a nuisance standpoint. I mean, we're seeing our lifestyles change. You turn on the TV and the furniture companies want you to buy outdoor furniture sets, and the barbecue companies want you to buy gallons of barbecue sauce that you're going to use in your $10,000 gas grill, and we should be able to enjoy the outdoors. So mosquito intervention is very, very important to many people from many different perspectives. So Kurt, can you give me, yeah, there we go. So, in this perfect storm, if you will, what can we do about mosquitoes? I think first off is to understand that this is a great opportunity for us to do a few things. One, of course, to grow our business, all right, to secure service agreements and serve the public as they need and as they request and as they require. This is also a terrific opportunity for us to really stand tall and demonstrate our expertise and our contributions to public health at large. And we talk a lot about being guardians of the environment, public health, et cetera, but the mosquito issue, which is so current, which is so in the sights of our customers right now, if we perform professionally, if we educate, if we communicate clearly, we can do a lot for our industry in general. All right? So I'm going to let Kurt take over now, and I'm going to tell him what we can do at Bayer to help you be successful, and what do we bring to the table for resources for you to join this fight.
Thanks, Joe. I think the number one thing that we provide is what's in bold on this slide, and it's science-based answers and global vector management experience. When people think about Bayer globally, we are recognized as the worldwide leader in vector control. For over 60 years, Bayer has been the leader when it comes to innovation and providing scientific, sound interventions that can combat mosquitoes. In fact, the same technology that we use today, and we're going to be talking about today in the United States, is used globally to combat mosquitoes and the diseases that they transmit. And it's very interesting to this point because when Dan was doing the introductions, he mentioned I was in the military, and when I was deployed to the Middle East, I remember watching some mosquito interventions being done. And it's really interesting, just whether you're in the Middle East or you're in Africa, where I visited not long ago, or in Latin America, the approach needs to be specific for your environment. And here in the United States, we believe that we have a solution, a protocol, an offering that's truly going to be the perfect fit for the pest control professional doing applications in either residential or commercial or a wide-scale setting. And all of these approaches need to be different. It's a tailored solution, and when you follow this approach, you'll be able to see very, very much so that our protocol can provide best-in-class results that will satisfy your customers and help prevent the spread of these public health diseases.
So what can we do to support you, the PMP? If you look closely at this document on here, you'll see there's a date there. At Bayer, we were cognizant and we kind of recognized the trend in regards to PMP response to mosquito management challenges and opportunities out in the marketplace for a couple of years, even before the Zika situation broke. So one of the first things we did is we sat down, and what you see here is a document that Kurt and I put together collectively and have refined over time, which we call our PMP Protocol for Mosquito Management. And this is more than just a product recommendation. What you'll see on this document is an integrated approach. If you look at the bullets on the left side of the slide there, yes, yeah, indeed, you have to do inspection. It's very important because part of the value that you provide to your customer is this environmental review and the diagnostics of what you see about conditions and what exists on the property that's going to maintain mosquito pressure on your customer. All right? So it includes how to look for, how to inspect the property, not only on the first visit, but every visit, because one of the important challenges that we have out there in mosquito management is that the conditions of mosquito pressure will change throughout the season. And it's not only just weather, it's based on some species that come at certain times of the year. It also occurs when people change their lifestyles a little bit as things change outside in the environment. You know, sometimes the boat's here, the boat's not there. The pool is used and the pool is not used, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about non-chemical mitigation measures. We're going to talk about the value of larviciding on a smaller scale for PMPs. We will, in the protocol, there's a description of how to look at the opportunity of wide area ULV applications. This is a strictly adulticiding application. Kurt will get into that detail in a little bit. And then really, when we talk about the active mosquito management efforts that we're going to make, it is the outdoor residual treatments. Now, this protocol is available to the marketplace. You can get it through your local Bayer area manager. You can source it through our authorized distribution network. And if need be, when we get to the end of this program, I'm going to be leaving my email address up here, and you can ask me. And as I wade through the questions and inquiries that come in, we will send this out to you as well. Okay, Kurt, so I think we can move on again. All right, and one of the things that I do want to spend some time talking about today is that in that active control effort that we're going to perform via these outdoor residual sprays, our recommended product is Suspend PolyZone. But I want to tell you a little bit of the historical development story of PolyZone, because this particular product was built prior to the big ramp up, the big rise in interest in mosquito control in the United States. But the global development purpose of PolyZone was for residual surface mosquito control. It was designed at the request and the requirements that were put down by the World Health Organization, who put a call out to insecticide registrants that they needed a residual product that would perform over extended periods of time on surfaces where residual products don't last that long. If you think about going to tropical and subtropical areas, and you look at the native and the typical residences and structures and such, surfaces vary from very, very modern all the way to quite primitive. And what Suspend PolyZone was built for was to be applied on these surfaces to kill landing mosquitoes both indoors and out on surfaces such as mud, straw, rough brick, stucco, tin, corrugated tin, wood, and that sort of thing. So that's where we start here in the United States as our recommendation for the outdoor residual spray is with Suspend PolyZone. Okay, can we get the next slide? And you probably, I hope you've seen this before in our outreach to you, both from our area managers, from our programs, from our attendance meetings. But Suspend PolyZone is our outdoor residual spray formulation. It's a suspension concentrate of deltamethrin, but the difference between it and other suspension concentrates is we've added a proprietary bare-sourced polymer to add to the formulation. And what that polymer does is it grabs onto the crystals, the physical solid crystals of deltamethrin, and when it is applied to the surface, it helps them bind to the surface, resist wash-off and ultraviolet degradation, all right, so that the product can provide up to a 90-day residual. It is wash-off, UV resistant, it does not stain, and it is non-phytotoxic. So we think this is an extremely effective answer for the challenge of providing outdoor residual mosquito control. Can we get the next slide, Kurt?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. You know, clearly we're recommending Suspend PolyZone as the #1 product for the outdoor barrier treatment because of all the great features and benefits that Joe just described, the protection from wash-off and from UV exposure. There's a lot of things that you can choose in making a mosquito application. You can certainly choose your equipment. You can choose your product. You can even choose your customers, right? But the one thing you can't choose is the weather. And when that 2 inches of rain in a gully wash occurs, you need a polymer to ensure that the active ingredient adheres to the surface which you have applied it to. In this case, as you can see in this picture, that would be the underside of leaves, of foliage, the resting site of mosquitoes, generally speaking, in a backyard setting. Now, that being said, we certainly understand the features and benefits and the great technology behind PolyZone's proprietary polymer formulation. Another thing to consider is the active ingredient. While the formulation certainly is the core of our success with this excellent product and the science behind it, it's also important to understand why we chose the active ingredient in this product. Deltamethrin has a long, safe history of use for mosquito control. It is a type 2 pyrethroid, and that makes it different from some other older generation type 1 pyrethroids, such as bifenthrin, permethrin, phenolphthrin, and perhaps alrethrin. And the difference is the fact that type 2 pyrethroids, such as deltamethrin, have an advantage. They have an alpha cyano group that protects this active ingredient, helps protect it rather, from insect enzymes that would easily break down older type 1 pyrethroids, such as bifenthrin. And as a result, not only does the formulation and the scientific innovation behind it provide PolyZone with a great efficacy for outdoor mosquito control, but also the active ingredient that was chosen, it makes it an effective tool for combating mosquitoes that may be showing resistance to some of the type 1 pyrethroids. And it's important to remember, everyone, you may hear phrases such as pyrethroid resistance. What's important is not to generalize these things, but rather understand that resistance is to an active ingredient, not an overall class of compounds. So when looking at a specific active ingredient, you can rest assured knowing that Bayer has chosen a highly efficacious AI, and that is deltamethrin. I'd like to move on now to some of the data that we've developed here at Bayer to support Suspend PolyZone in this use pattern. On this figure that I'm presenting currently, I want to draw your attention to the top. The pest that we evaluated was Aedes aegypti. This, of course, is the yellow fever mosquito, transmits everything from Zika to dengue to chikungunya. It's a very, very important public health pest, often referred to as public enemy number one when you're talking about vector control. This is a daytime active mosquito that is a breeder in containers and likes that backyard setting that you're tasked with protecting your customers in. As the slides advance, you'll notice that the numbers at the top will change. The bolded number that says 0 day, that means that this slide is reflecting fresh treatments with all of the products listed here, and it's freshly dried residues. So a glazed tile was sprayed with Suspend PolyZone at both the low, the mid, and the high rate, and then Demand CS at 0.03%, CalStar at 0.03%, and Sidekick at 0.05%. As the slides advance, we'll go from 0 day to 7 day, so on and so forth. So all we're doing is looking at this picture over time. That's your reference point as we move forward. I'd like to point something out that's very crucial here. The exposure time. Aedes aegypti exposed to the treated surface were only exposed to the treated surface for 3 minutes. A lot of studies, and this is something to pay attention to across the board whenever you're looking at data, what's the exposure time? Obviously, if you have a pest and you expose it to a surface for a longer and longer period of time, your chances for having mortality are going to increase with exposure. That's a general trend. But when you think about the backyard resting environment, mosquitoes, when they land on a treated surface, generally speaking, don't like to hang out there for too long. So that 3-minute exposure time really gives you a good view of operationally what you would see in the field. And that's why this laboratory test has an excellent representation of product efficacy as you would see in your backyard setting on a treated surface. So we're going to go from 0 day. You see all products performing very well. Freshly dried residues, we would expect that. We go out to 28 days. This is an important slide because most people are in that 21 to 30 day interval. 21 being the minimum, and we see a lot of people there at the 1 month interval. And at 28 days, it's very clear to everyone on this webinar that PolyZone, all 3 rates, low, mid, and high, provides excellent control, anywhere from 95 to 100%, whereas competitive products fail to provide any level of adequate control. As Joe was talking about PolyZone's excellent residual and why it has this long residual and is labeled for 90-day residual, you can see here at 56 days, which is about the longest we've seen anybody do mosquito control in a residual backyard setting. If you were utilizing Suspend PolyZone at the mid and the high rates, you can see that it is the only product at, once again, the mid and high rates, label rates, that can give you adequate control of your mosquitoes in the backyard setting. And I think this should give you a lot of confidence in the product, and that fact that what if you can't make it back at your 28-day interval and you have to wait till 40 days? You can know that PolyZone is going to withstand the environmental pressures, the things that you can't control, the things you can't choose. PolyZone's there, and you're backed by Bayer. Joe, I'm going to let you talk about IGRs since I know you have a history with it.
Well, actually, we both do, Kurt, of course. But I'm old enough to say that I remember when the insect growth regulators first sort of broke onto the market, not only for mosquito control, but across in some of the pest control opportunities as well. I actually even studied under, at school, Dr. John Edmond was one of the key field cooperators for the development of the methoprene products out there for insect growth regulators, and I've applied insect growth regulators as a public employee of a mosquito control project. And there's a lot of talk about IGRs in you know, the opportunity for PMPs and mosquito control, and I'm asked, you know, do they work? And the answer, quite frankly and specifically, is insect growth regulators are effective against mosquitoes. However, you have to understand the window of opportunity and the target stage of the insect where these products make a difference, and that is the immature stage, and even more restricted in most cases, the first and second instar larvae, the aquatic stage of the insect. If sufficient amount of insect growth regulator is present, IGRs will do their magic. Growth regulators are either mimics or analogs of the naturally produced hormone that the insect creates. The juvenoid IGRs, which is the chemistries that we're talking about here with mosquito control, their purpose is to mimic the action of these hormones that occur in the insect. These are hormones that literally help to control the developmental time of the immature stage. We used to use the, I actually worked also for over 10 years for the primary pioneer registrant of growth regulators in the United States, but we used to use the phrase that they act something like a fountain of youth. They give the insect sufficient time to stay immature, to collect the resources, to feed and collect the nutrients and what it needed to become a successful adult. Growth regulators, when exposed to our target insect, in this case a mosquito larva at the right time, their hormone balance is abnormally high. When they finally go to pupation, when other factors take over and push them into pupation, the magic occurs, and that magic is that the IGR effect prevents the immature from becoming a completely formed adult, and this sort of half immature, half adult phase of the insect literally cannot emerge. It's not a successfully formed adult, and they die. So that's the benefit that IGRs offer to mosquito control. The trick, though, is when we look at the history of IGR use, we'll look to the public sector, to the abatement districts and the mosquito control projects, in how they apply insect growth regulators, and they apply these products as targeted applications directly into the developmental site of the most sensitive stage of the insect, its most sensitive stage of the mosquito larva, which is an aquatic environment. And this is what the MADs, the mosquito abatement districts, have been doing for over 30 years now. I think the disconnect is the thought that when we apply them into the environment, they'll eventually get there. I'm not sure if that happens, all right? And the fact that the public mosquito abatement districts, who are professionals in their own, they've to this day, they still continue to apply these products only in this manner. So I think we should learn from them that the utility of an IGR is as a very focused, targeted larvicide. And the fact that they don't do wide area applications, and in fact, there's been a little bit of some work done over the last 5 or 6 years to try and get a larvicide to work, not IGRs in this case, but the wide area applications of the bacterial product, to see if they can gain some efficiencies in larviciding over wide areas. And unfortunately, even that work has not worked out well. So IGRs are good. However, IGRs are best when they're targeted directly into the larval habitat. All right. So let's get the next slide, if we can, Kurt. So even further is the concept of when we take mix adulticides and IGRs, apply them to the correct sites as allowed by the label, which are typically mosquito resting sites where adults are going to hide during the day to stay out of the bright sunlight. Remember, mosquitoes, very small insects, very, very delicate insects, extremely sensitive to moisture loss. So when they are not actively feeding, they tend to hide under foliage in shady areas. That's where we want to apply our direct residual treatments. And if adult mosquitoes land on these surfaces that have been treated with an effective adulticide, we're going to expect them to die. I mean, that's what the mosquito adulticides were registered for. That's what they were demonstrated to provide to the EPA to get their registration number and approve label language. And I'm going to borrow again shamelessly, as I borrowed Michael Potter's phrase, and Kurt taught me this some months ago when he said quite plainly, sounded a lot like Clint Eastwood, dead mosquitoes can't lay eggs. All right. So the presence of an insect growth regulator on a properly treated surface with an effective adulticide, we question whether it's going to provide any real value to you in your program out there. We also have to remember that in today's day and age of environmental sensitivity, there are some non-targeted issues with growth regulators we should consider out there. We use growth regulators in the pest management industry for things like cockroaches and ants. And again, the manner in which we apply them is typically directly into the habitat where the stage of the insect most sensitive to the growth regulator, that exposure will occur and provide that benefit. Okay, Kurt, can you give us the next one? Another comment I want to make about what's going on out there is some comparisons in regards to costs. Kurt made a very good comment earlier when he was talking about looking at data slides. Make sure you pay attention to the details in regards to, you know, times of exposure, the percentage of active ingredient that the insect's being exposed to. Is it realistic? And we've seen some cost comparisons out there which tend to be not matched as apples to apples out there. What you need to do when you look at your options to provide the service that you wish to sell is not only the finished cost of the tank mix, but how many days your service is going to cover in regards to warranty or what your extension of protection. One of the things that Suspend PolyZone offers you is a range of rates, which if you talk to us, if you help, you know, if we can give you some help with that, we can probably provide you with a very cost-effective solution based on the number of service visits you expect to make out there. Also remember that there is variability in season. For instance, if you live in an area which is wet in the spring, we strongly suggest that you use perhaps a fairly higher label rate because the weather issues are much more extreme. And then you might be able to dial it down during the summer as it gets drier. Now, one hint I want to give at this point, and I think this is an important one that I've been trying to share with the industry, is that there's a great resource out there in the marketplace that you're probably not paying attention to, and that is you can gather terrific information on mosquito pressure and mosquito disease activity in your local area, typically from your state health department. All right? I'll give you the example up here in Massachusetts, is that the State Department of Public Health publishes a weekly report during the season, and it's already started here in Massachusetts, on mosquito pressure. They give synopsis reports on what every public mosquito control project is doing, and disease presence and activity out in the environment. In addition, like we have here in Massachusetts, they will also tend to give you the weather trends and what to expect in the upcoming weeks. So I suggest that if you feel this is important to you, go to your State Department of Public Health website and under the search bar, type in vector report or vector activity report, and you should be able to find it. If you don't have organized mosquito control in your area, there still typically is an information source for vector activity at the State Department of Public Health. So you can use this information just the same way as we use sticky traps for cockroaches and census blocks for rodents. Okay, so let's go to the next one, if we can, Kurt. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about today before we close up is, and start taking questions, is an option for the industry. And that has to do with the ability or the opportunity to provide area-wide treatments with ultra-low volume applications. These are mosquito adulticide sprays that are applied very small amounts of insecticide through specialized equipment. This is something typically the industry has not embraced. However, we will talk to you about the opportunities that are out there. Not only economic, like you can see on this slide here, even though mosquito control projects have legal right to perform these applications around communities, what they don't do is they don't pay particular attention to address the service needs of private establishments. And one of the opportunities that's out there for the pest management professional is you may be able to provide area-wide treatments for things like event service, graduation parties, weddings, that sort of thing. Multifamily neighborhood associations, we know now that in a lot of parts of the country, development continues in these gated communities. They have associations, condominium associations and such, and also large commercial properties. And these include outdoor sites, venues, racetracks, sports stadiums, amusement parks, that sort of thing. This can make you stand out and compete much more effectively out in the marketplace if you consider these types of service. All right, so Kurt, I'm going to kind of let you take over and describe what these ultra-low volume area-wide treatments are all about.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. Really great teeing that up. You know, so this next slide, you can see we have two images. The top one is of a handheld ULV unit. You may be familiar with this. You may have this in your equipment locker. This type of a handheld fogging unit may be used for stored product tests, for example. That same type of equipment is the type of equipment that will apply Delta Gard. Delta Gard can be applied through handheld, backpack, or truck-mounted ULV applications. We certainly recommend that you go to your distribution partner and inquire about equipment if you have any questions. And we've tested Delta Gard in numerous handheld backpack and truck units, and it's compatible with all current ULV foggers on the market. The bottom picture is what you won't look like when you're applying Delta Gard. Delta Gard is a water-based formulation, and it has an EPA reduced risk classification. This is very important. You won't have to get in the spaceman suit that you see with that individual down there. Rather, in someone's backyard, you'll simply be walking around in your uniform. The PPE requirements for Delta Gard are actually very much similar to that for Suspend PolyZone. You don't need a respirator. Do not need a face shield. And so it's a very nice, easy product to apply. It provides fast knockdown. As Joe was saying, this is not a residual product. It is a ULV adulticide that drifts through the air, and when it comes into contact with adult mosquitoes, provides fast knockdown and has been proven in a nationwide study that took place in over 18 states and included over 35 trials with mosquito abatement districts, public mosquito control, who are generally doing this service on truck-mounted units. And in these studies, Delta Gard was demonstrated time and time again to provide fast knockdown, and it was able to kill pyrethroid-resistant mosquitoes. This is a great part of our technology behind Delta Gard and its patented features, which make it the best-in-class product when it comes to ULV adulticiding. And once again, I want to emphasize that this is a water-based product. It can be mixed with water, and we recommend for handheld ULV units a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 part water to 1 part Delta Gard. And something it's important to consider when we're talking about this product is the low application rates. You can see here, this is an image of a truck-mounted unit. This truck-mounted unit, you can see, has a nozzle at the end, which puts out the ULV adulticide, in this case, Delta Gard. And if you want to visualize how little active ingredient is used to treat an area, think about holding an aspirin in your hand. Now take that aspirin and disperse it over a football field. That is the incredibly low application rates that we see with Delta Gard insecticide. This ULV non-residual product can provide this excellent control at incredibly low use rates. And if this is new and it sounds new to you or new technology, ULV applications have been around ever since we got back from World War II. In fact, the first foggers that were used were actually taken off of Navy ships that created fog as a type of camouflage to block the movement of the Navy ships. Little side note there. So the application use pattern has been around for a long time, but Delta Gard hasn't. It's a brand new innovation from Bayer, EPA reduced risk with extremely low application rates. Joe, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about just how the industry is responding to this, and just give us some more insights.
Thanks, Kurt. Because both Kurt and I have covered both the public side of the business as well as the private. Sometimes a lot of people on both sides feel that there's sort of this competition or animosity between the public abatement districts and the private industry and such, but really that's not true. And in fact, given the public profile right now of mosquito control and the sort of growing risk of mosquito-borne disease in the United States, I've always felt that the two service approaches are quite complementary, where the public abatement districts don't have the opportunity nor the resources to pay attention to smaller plots, smaller properties, individual properties. That's where we in the pest management industry fit in, and vice versa, is that you can learn a lot on private side and rely on what the public abatement districts are doing to lessen overall pressure to make your program that much more effective out there. Now, like everything in life, there's change, and one of the things that we're seeing in regards to mosquito control is that the associated industries supporting our business are changing as well. We've seen some development of some very nice, efficient, easy to use, lightweight ULV generators out there that can take a product like Gard and apply it correctly over the over properties that don't weigh 600 pounds, that don't cost $8,000 or $9,000. I'm predicting that we're going to see more of this small scale area-wide treatments by private applicators being performed in the future because of the opportunity to service the public that the public abatement districts just can't do. So mosquito control is going to progress, it's going to change, and the question is whether or not you individually are going to sort of embrace this change as an opportunity out there. All right, so in conclusion, before we start to get to questions and everything, our mosquito solution package, if you will, is based on a number of things. But first and foremost, remember, we talked about the comprehensive protocol that Kurt and I have put together that we keep an eye on, and it's a fluid document, an evergreen document, which we're willing to share with you. In addition, from there, we have the right portfolio of products that we can provide you for both the outdoor residual barrier treatments and then the consideration of getting into the small-scale wide area applications with the new Gard ULV product. And the most important component are the bear people, the bear team that's out there. And we use this term, and we don't use it lightly, backed by bear. This is a commitment our entire PPM team makes to take care of you, to listen. A lot of our product development, a lot of our success over the years has been driven based on your feedback, your inquiries, the requirements that you brought to us, the what ifs, why can'ts of the world. And that's one thing I'm very, very proud of being part of it there. So any questions, any kind of support that you need in regards to our product line, or you just want to talk in general, please reach out to your nearest bear representative or go through the Pest Practices website and try and get them to us, and we'll try to help you as much as we can. So on behalf of Kurt, I'm going to say we're closed with the presentation right now. And Dan, I think it's question and answer time.
Okay, yeah, we have about 20 minutes available for questions, so we'll just start plowing through them here. One of the first questions is, can you offer any insights about weather trends and timing of your mosquito applications?
Let me take this one, Kurt, for right now. Of course, in a perfect world, you want to make an application when there's no precipitation, fairly low wind, and the product has an adequate amount of time to dry. That's a little variable on the relative humidity outside. However, what we've seen in practice is that when you're doing your outdoor residual treatment with a mist blower, all right, if you can get a good solid 30 minutes to an hour before any potential precipitation, irrigation interference, that sort of thing, the polymer has time to set up and will protect the product.
Okay. There's a question about the protocols you listed. Are all those elements highly recommended by you, or is there any that you would focus more heavily on?
Well, to be comprehensive and integrated in our integrated world, or our IPM world, we recommend following all of them. All right. I think one of the key value feedback or returns you get when you follow each point on the protocol is you're demonstrating to your customer the value that they're going to get back from the partnership they have with you. Remember that pest management today is not just about spraying something around or putting down a product or maintaining bait stations, etc. We're seeing great changes. And even though I grew up in the IPM era, or you grew up in the IPM era, and we've been talking about IPM, I joke sometimes when I'm on stage in live training programs that, you know, I've been yakking about IPM for 30 plus years now. Boy, if you don't get it now. But we are honestly coming into the era where the bulk of our time on site is going to be spent doing the diagnostics, doing the interpretations, and doing the communicating and educating back to the customer rather than doing physical applications. The regulations, the product form, the formulation science is going to create fewer minutes on site to do applications. So we have to demonstrate value to the marketplace in other ways. I joke that, technicians aren't technicians today. We really should be calling them diagnosticians. And that's, again, why I say try to commit as much as you can to those non-chemicals, those non-application focused points and directions and initiatives on that protocol.
Yeah, Joe,
Okay.
that was good. I just want to add one point there. When you think about all the steps that we had in there, I think part of that question might have been, do I have to do Delta Gard? Do I have to do the Delta Gard treatment? Now, to be clear, no, you don't. If you want that 21-day residual, you have to have the residual product. The reason we're recommending the Delta Gard is because I want you to think about it like a clean out. When you spray residual pyrethroid product onto a surface, it requires that the mosquito then fly, this adult mosquito in someone's backyard, fly and interact, meaning land on that surface, so that it can receive the dose of insecticide and then, in the case of PolyZone, die. We all know that our customers want immediate results, and that's what Delta Gard can provide that no other product can. That clean out where you go in and all the adult mosquitoes in your customer's backyard get wiped out by that non-residual ULV Delta Gard application. And then your barrier that you put up with Suspend PolyZone is there to protect that yard for 30, 50, 60 days against other mosquitoes that may try to get in and bother your customer.
Okay, here's another question. When treating shrubbery, would the addition of a spreader sticker be beneficial? Spreader sticker be beneficial?
No.
Thanks, Dan. No, yeah. Go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say no. That's not necessary, and it would actually be against the title of our presentation, and that is effective mosquito control for less. PolyZone was designed with this polymer so that you don't need a sticker, you don't need a spreader. Bayer takes a lot of pride in its formulation technology and science behind it. Coming from research and development, I can tell you that while there's 4.75% AI in your PolyZone, that other 95%, that other ingredients, that 95% is so very important. And at Bayer, we've ensured that you don't need to add anything to the tank. You have one solution, one product, the Suspend PolyZone. Feel comfortable and feel confident using Bayer's technology.
Do you recommend using baffle when using backpack sprayer? Not sure what that means.
Well, I'm wondering if he's talking about the attachment that goes on the front of the nozzle. What's it called, Kurt? It slipped my mind right now. The diffuser.
Yes,
the diffuser. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep. Yeah, I've done training on the steel units, the 450 and the 250, and I do recommend using the round sort of target site diffuser on that. I believe that it helps to break the insecticide stream into finer particles and keep them sort of concentrated as they come out of the nozzle, where you can, one of the things we try to teach people is when you're using a mist blower, when you're physically doing your application, when the insecticide is starting to flow, we want you to run full throttle. You want full throttle because the power of the machine needs to be at its optimum to create the right particle size as it goes through the blower unit. And secondarily is the diffuser, that attachment that goes on the end of the nozzle helps to create the right pattern out that maintains some of that kinetic energy, so you'll get fairly good penetration through the foliage. And the third thing we teach people is when you're walking and you're making the application to the surfaces, you want to move your arm in a circular motion. It sort of creates a little bit of a cyclonic effect, which will help the insecticide particle stream sort of drift upwards. Because remember, the most important target site when we're doing foliage or even labeled sites on structures is the underside. It's all about the hiding from the sun, and that's where we want to try and make sure we get as much of our application onto those surfaces as possible.
Absolutely right, Joe. And all of this is detailed. In fact, we talk about the diffuser in that comprehensive protocol that Joe and I have been talking about. So make sure you reach out to your Bayer area manager and ask for that protocol. We talk about the diffuser. We talk about all those details and best practices that Joe just mentioned. It's all in that protocol.
Okay, here's another question. What is the earliest reapplication period for the product?
Earliest by label is 21 days.
Okay. The webinar talks about, among other things, sound mosquito control for less. What is the price per diluted gallon for Suspend PolyZone, and what volume of diluted do you recommend for an average residential yard?
Okay.
And they use, this PMP uses a steel mist blower, about 3.5 gallons.
Well, it's hard for me to quote prices because our distribution sets the final price, so I can't tell you. I can't answer that specifically. But one thing that we have watched our customers, we've advised them, and they've given us feedback on, is that typically it's based on mosquito pressure. It's also based on the current weather trend. So that's where I go back to my recommendation to get onto the mailing list, if you will, or if you can for your State Department of Public Health, watch those mosquito reports. But there is a natural progression that can occur that you can apply a fairly high rate early in the spring as mosquitoes start to come out. Spring brood mosquitoes, at least here where I live, tend to be much more aggressive biters than some of the later season species that are out there. And as you move through, if conditions are right, and in fact you're doing your applications effectively, you're able to dial it back a little bit, and that way you can save yourself a little money over the long run. In this form, it's very difficult to explain exactly how to do that, and I would suggest the person who asked send me that email, and I'll try and get into a conversation with you, and I can tell you a little bit more specifically on how to look at that.
In treating backyards for mosquitoes with Suspend, is there a concern about notifying neighbors and any concerns about chemical drift?
There's always concern about drift, okay? I mean, and that's why if you look at the protocol, it talks about prior application that you walk and inspect the perimeter and the boundaries of the property. You want to know what's on the other side. Worst case scenario is one thing we want you to avoid doing is you're doing an application and your product drifts over a hedgerow and right into the swimming pool of the neighbor. So you have to pay attention to what's going on the other side. The label directions are clear in regards to how you do your applications, but use caution and by all means, peek over the fence, see what's on the other side prior to application and adjust accordingly.
Does PolyZone being a type 2 have any additional benefits to pollinators?
I'll leave that to Kurt.
Yeah, so when they say type 2, I'm assuming that's in reference to a type 2 pyrethroid. It doesn't matter if it's a type 1 pyrethroid, a type 2 pyrethroid, or a neonic. You want to be very careful. Don't spray flowering shrubs. Don't spray if you see active foraging of pollinators. It doesn't matter what the product is. It doesn't matter if it's Suspend PolyZone. It doesn't matter if it's an insecticide. You got to keep it away from the pollinators. That's best practice. We all know this, and as a result, you treat it just like you would any other insecticide, and that is being very safe around pollinators and forage sites.
Did you say that for PolyZone does not require any face mask or respirator while applying?
Correct. The PPE for Suspend PolyZone is listed on the label as the only PPE that is required. I'll be very clear on this. The only PPE that is required for Suspend PolyZone is goggles or a face shield if you are applying the product directly, be very clear, directly overhead. And I just want to make the comment that anybody who's doing a backyard residual application for mosquito control should not be applying the product directly over your head. That's just silly. And of course, in California, you're going to want to wear gloves and pay attention to your local state or local regulations as they may be. But currently on the label, the listed PPE is exactly as I just said.
This is a similar question, I guess, to one that was previously asked. I see the label treatment interval rate says maybe apply to 21-day intervals or as necessary to gain control. Does that imply that one can retreat a property 14 days after the initial if the customer is still experiencing the same amount of mosquitoes?
Yeah, Dan, that was a little slip on my part. The answer is yes, but I would not anticipate it being a problem within 21 days. unless something changes very drastically, you know, in the environment and such. You know, there's a series of storms that come through, and another one here we appreciate very well in New England is when we have the big full flood tide and all the salt marsh mosquitoes come out at once. But the questioner is correct. The label does state you can use it if necessary before 21 days.
Right, and it's a very important point, and it's very common language on virtually all pesticide labels. The 21-day interval is the common one that you see, and it says you know, retreat at 21 days or as needed to achieve control. And obviously that the definition of control is certainly up to your customer's expectations, right? If there's mosquitoes, you need to do a retreat because it rained 20 minutes after application and you didn't expect it, or something like that, then certainly that's something that would be allowable by the label. But with Suspend PolyZone, I'm certain adoption of this product, you'll see your callbacks go down.
Given your extensive field experience and technical background, what is your recommended method of mosquito control, i.e. backpack sprayer, power sprayer, etc.?
I'm gonna be a very strong advocate for the powered mist blower. All right, for residual treatments, for residual barrier treatments. I know that you can use a power rig. I mean, the label allows it. Part of my problem with the power rig is that it's not the most precise or, I want to say gentle, but I think it overpowers the treatment, the landing sites of the insecticide. You also have to understand as you're doing these applications to get good coverage over, let's say, you know, foliage and shrubs and bushes and such. You're going to see quite a bit of runoff for the most part. That's a lot of wasted product. You know, as this title program is effective mosquito control for less, the use of a power rig tends to waste a lot of product off the optimum landing zones, landing sites, treatment sites for your residual product out there. A backpack sprayer is more efficient, or let's say more effective, but my goodness gracious, it's a ton of work. And I can tell you that from experience. I've had to do it before, both you know, as part of my job and personally. My problem with the backpack sprayers, as good as they are, is they typically just don't have the reach and the sort of the pressure and volume to get the product out efficiently. So what you end up having is the applicator has to spend too much time on site to do an adequate job.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Are you seeing any PMP government partnerships as a result of the Zika situation?
Yes, yeah. What we've seen is during the initial CDC sort of flare-up, there was a you know what, Kurt, you talk to this more because you've been much more involved. You've been intimately involved with the CDC efforts. So I'm sorry I stepped on your toes there, buddy. You go ahead.
No worries, Joe, no worries. So yeah, Bayer is really proud of how we've stepped up and been working with the CDC on best practices. There have been several pest control companies that have received funding from the federal government, CDC funding, specifically in this case, to be on call if there's an outbreak or a need to respond to disease. Generally speaking, right now, all of the actionable items that can occur from, let's say, funding from the government require that there be some type of presence of disease. Now, this approach has been changing a little. At the last Zika Action Summit, which was held in February, I was there with the CDC. They were readdressing how they were trying to look at the cases. So, you know, I said at the beginning that while the local transmission was primarily found only in the Miami-Dade area, clearly anybody who's contracted Zika is a potential reservoir for spreading a disease within the viremic period of it. So I think there might be some shifts in the future, and we should all watch to see how we can all help where there's these gaps in mosquito control, because we know there's gaps. There's a lot of counties that don't have public mosquito control, and that's certainly an opportunity for pest control experts to step in the private market. And further to that point, it certainly is a good idea to maybe ask some of the public municipalities, what are you doing about this part? What's happening at the school before a football game? There might be a need in your local area. And I think it's certainly a good idea to step up and say, I have this nice protocol from Bayer. It tells me how I can treat not just a backyard, but a wide open area like a football field or a soccer field or a big park with Gard. And that's really what we're trying to do here is enable everyone on the line to have new business opportunities and protect the public in as many places as you can.
Yeah, I'll add a little caution, Kurt, on that is that, remember, if you're going to be dealing with a municipality and acting on their behalf under contract, strongly suggest that you check with your local regulator to see if you need the specific mosquito and biting fly certification for your state. In most cases, you do.
Yes, correct.
Okay, one last question, just to remind everyone that the folks at Bayer will be provided with all of the questions. We had an awful lot of questions come in, so they will be forwarded those questions. So those that we didn't address today, they'll be able to follow up on. We did get a couple questions relating to ticks, and can we expect some secondary level of control on ticks as a result of this type of treatment?
You're certainly in that area where you're going to find ticks. If you're talking about where the managed turf meets a natural area, if you're spraying foliage in that area on the periphery of a house, the one thing that you really need to remember is ticks are a fundamentally different creature than a mosquito. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the man who lives in the Northeast, Tick Central. Joe, I would be a fool to not let you tackle this one. Go for it.
Hey, thanks. It's funny it comes up, Dan, because real quick, I took some visitors from out of the area on a nice little hike down to a saltwater marsh this weekend, and when we came back, I said we have to do a tick check, and they all laughed until we started pulling ticks, and in 4 people, we took 22 ticks off ourselves. So, yes, it's important. It is a growing problem. And mosquito control and tick control are not necessarily joined at the hip, and that has to do with the fact that, one, ticks are not found up off the ground as far as mosquitoes are when it comes to where they land, where they rest, and where we're going to control them with these outdoor residual sprays with PolyZone and such. The good news is that tick management is possible. It's not fundamentally difficult to do. And if you have questions on tick management, again, reach out to your area manager. We have some very effective products. We've been working on tick management for many years, and we can guide you in the right direction. But I would not promise any kind of effect on ticks from what you're performing in a typical residential mosquito control program.
Okay, well, we'd like to thank Joe Burley and Dr. Kurt Vandock for their insights today, and we would like to thank all of those who attended today's webinar. And as I indicated, they will be following up. If you have any questions for either of the speakers today, you have their email addresses, and we'll be providing them with the questions that we weren't able to address in today's webinar. So thank you for participating, and have a good day.